They say history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure likes to whisper the same warnings to new listeners. And few listeners were sharper or more merciless than Mao Zedong. When Mao read about Zhuge Liang, the legendary strategist of the Three Kingdoms, he didn't see a saint of wisdom or a poster boy for loyalty. He saw a man trapped by his own architecture. Mao's verdict was blunt enough to crack granite. He erred from the start, dividing his forces across 1,000 miles. In the end, Guan Yu, Liu Bei, and Zhuge Liang each fought their own separate wars. How could they not be defeated? It's not poetic, it's diagnosis. And like any good surgeon, Mao was cutting into structure, not sentiment. Zhuge Liang's famous Longzhong Plan, his pitch to the warlord Liu Bei, was pure elegance on paper. Step 1. Capture Jingzhou, the gateway to central China. Step 2. Secure Yizhou, the basin of the southwest. Step 3. Build power quietly, ally with Sun Quan state in the southeast, and when the north falls into chaos, launch a two-front strike on the heartland ruled by Cao Wei. It sounded like a strategic symphony, balanced, visionary, patient. But Mao would have looked at it the way an engineer looks at a bridge drawn by an artist. Pretty lines, wrong load-bearing points. To Mao, Longzhong wasn't a master plan. It was a structural trap disguised as brilliance. The moment Liu Bei said yes, the countdown to failure began. Mao had one rule tattooed into his brain from decades of war. Concentrate your forces, crush one enemy at a time. That principle was his hammer and anvil. From the Long March to the Civil War, Mao's approach was almost algorithmic. Stretch your enemy, compress yourself, hit where they're thin. Now, look at Zhuge Liang's plan. Two strongholds, Jingzhou and Yizhou, separated by rivers, mountains, and roughly 1,000 miles of terrible logistics. One guarded by Guan Yu, the other by Liu Bei's core army. One road connecting them flanked by rivals who hated both. To Mao, that wasn't strategy, it was suicide by geometry. You can almost imagine him shaking his head. Two centers of gravity, no secure corridor, and your supply line runs through people who might stab you before they feed you? Fantastic! You've invented the first distributed failure system in military history. He would call it the long-distance relationship of death. You see, Mao's genius was in compression. He won not by having more men, but by making his smaller forces hit harder and faster. Zhuge's plan made that impossible. Every reinforcement was a month away. Every supply run was a dice roll, and every delay was a gift to the enemy.
Zhuge Liang's plan assumed a long-term alliance with Sun Quan, the ruler of the southeastern state of Wu. Ally with Sun Quan to strike the north, he advised. Mao would have laughed his cigarette out. Alliances to Mao were tools, not lifelines. You use them, you don't live by them. He'd spent decades watching Chiang Kai-shek pretend friendship while plotting ambushes, and Stalin promise aid while playing chess with corpses. To him, trusting an ally to hold your eastern flank was like trusting a cat to guard your fish. And indeed, the cat pounced. When Guan Yu's army held Jingzhou, technically joint territory, Sun Quan saw an opportunity. One betrayal later, Jingzhou was gone, Guan Yu was dead, and half of Zhuge Liang's strategic triangle collapsed into the Yangtze River. Mao would have laughed it a structural inevitability, not bad luck. If your plan relies on someone else's good behavior, it's not a plan, it's a prayer. To understand why Mao thought Zhuge Liang was doomed, you have to understand Mao's psychology of war. He believed weak players survive by being fast, focused, and flexible. You don't match the enemy's strength, you multiply your speed. Zhuge Liang did the opposite. He designed a slow, methodical, bureaucratically perfect campaign system, a perpetual motion machine of paperwork, regulations, and cautious offensives. He reorganized the government, improved logistics, recruited diligently, taxed fairly, and train troops systematically. In any other context, that's the behavior of a model leader. But in Mao's playbook, that's how you lose momentum before you even start. Mao fought the Japanese and the nationalists by doing the opposite. Hit, vanish, repeat. Every battle was a flashbang. Zhuge Liang instead turned war into a subscription plan. Pay annually, hope for progress, cancel never. His northern campaigns became seasonal events, almost ritualistic. Each spring he set out with his troops, marched through the same valleys, fought the same stalemates, and returned with slightly fewer men. It was the world's first military hamster wheel. Mao would have recognized the rhythm instantly, the tempo of exhaustion. To him, Zhuge's campaign wasn't war, it was national endurance testing.
Then came the Street Pavilion, Zhuge Liang's first northern expedition, his grand debut. His forces were well organized, morale high, supplies ready. Everything pointed to success. And then he did the one thing Mao could never forgive. He delegated. He sent his protege, Ma Su, to defend the crucial pass at Street Pavilion. Ma Su, full of theory and arrogance, ignored orders to hold the water source. He camped on a hill instead, lost the pass, and with it the campaign. Mao's note in the margin of his history book was short and surgical. He should have commanded the first battle himself. In Mao's eyes, Zhuge Liang had just broken the cardinal law of revolutionary leadership. The first battle is the tone setter, and the commander must be there in person. Mao's own early defeats had burned this lesson into his bones. You lead from the front at the start, or you never control morale again. Zhuge Liang corrected that mistake later. He personally led every campaign afterward, but the damage was done. His legend rose, his state declined, and his army learned to admire him as a moral saint, not as a killer of enemies. Mao admired none of that. To Mao, admiration is what you get when you stop inspiring fear in your opponents. Part of what fascinated Mao about Zhuge Liang was that he did everything right, and still lost. He worked day and night. He punished corruption, rewarded merit, balanced civil and military power. He was, as one historian put it, the model prime minister every dynasty wished it had. And yet the state he built, Shu, collapsed barely 30 years after his death. To Mao, that proved something terrifying. Virtue doesn't scale. You can't win a continental war through perfect paperwork. You win by breaking someone else's system faster than they can rebuild it. Zhuge Liang's system was designed for integrity, not disruption. He built a moral machine in an immoral environment. It's like showing up to a gang fight with a legal textbook. Admirable, but statistically fatal.
Mao's brain was wired for patterns. When he looked at Longzhong, he didn't see Liu Bei's dream or Zhuge Liang's genius. He saw the geometry of failure. The triangle of Shu's power, Yizhao, Jingzhao, and the north, was inherently unstable. Lose one, and the other two collapse. It's like trying to balance a stool on one broken leg. The correct design, in Mao's view, would have been compression. Abandon Jingzhao early, consolidate in Yizhao, seize the northern corridor through Hanzhong, and strike at the heart of Wei in one concentrated campaign. Risky, but potentially decisive. Instead, Zhuge Liang locked himself into a model that could only function with perfect cooperation from an unreliable ally and perfect patience from an overwhelmingly stronger enemy. Neither existed. So Mao's verdict stands. The failure was baked into the architecture. The Longzhong Plan was the original too big to pivot. Both Mao and Zhuge Liang were intellectuals who turned ideas into weapons. But they played on different maps. Zhuge Liang fought in a fragmented empire where logistics crawled and manpower was finite. Mao fought in an age of railroads, radios, and mass mobilization. Yet their difference wasn't just technological, it was philosophical. Zhuge Liang believed in order.
Mao believed in chaos. Zhuge sought equilibrium. Mao sought disequilibrium. Zhuge wanted to restore civilization. Mao wanted to rewire it. To put it crudely, Zhuge Liang was a CEO trying to stabilize a collapsing company. Mao was a startup founder burning everything to rebuild the industry from scratch. And while Zhuge Liang's company produced excellent quarterly reports, orderly administration, loyal staff, high ethics, it eventually went bankrupt. Mao's startup burned half the building, but somehow survived to take over the market. That's why Mao, for all his ruthlessness, looked at Zhuge Liang with a kind of tragic respect. The man was brilliant, but he'd optimized for the wrong game. Every generation has its impossible dream. For Zhuge Liang, it was to restore the Han dynasty by conquering northward. He couldn't not do it. The dream was his legitimacy, his religion. But to Mao, that was another fatal bug, the inability to redefine victory. If your entire legitimacy depends on achieving an impossible symbolic goal, you've handed your enemy the keys to your exhaustion. Zhuge Liang had turned the northward war into a ritual of faith, not a calculation of success. Each failed campaign deepened his legend and drained his nation. That paradox fascinated Mao, how a man could win admiration while losing everything that mattered. It was the story of the pure strategist caught in a dirty world.
Let's imagine, just for fun, that Mao had been born in the Three Kingdoms era and somehow joined Liu Bei's camp. He would have ignored the Longzhong Plan entirely. First, he'd tell Liu Bei to dump Jingzhou. It's a liability. Pull every soldier into Yizhou, seal the passes, and spend a decade turning it into a fortress-factory hybrid. Second, he'd run guerrilla campaigns in the north, not formal invasions. Bleed Wei's supply lines, sabotage, assassinate, destabilize but never occupy. Third, he'd wait until Wei was collapsing from internal decay, then send one overwhelming strike straight at its capital. Short, concentrated, and ruthless. Mao didn't believe in balance of power. He believed in power imbalance, engineered, intentional, and brutal. He might still lose, of course, but his failure would be fast, not polite. Mao's criticism of Zhuge Liang is less about personalities and more about systems. He saw that even brilliant minds can design elegant cages. Zhuge Liang's brilliance locked him into a plan that couldn't evolve. Every victory was temporary, every defeat permanent. Mao's takeaway was cold, but universal. Never build a plan that depends on the world behaving, because the world never does. In modern terms, Zhuge Liang was the founder who over-engineered his product before finding market fit. Mao was the founder who shipped early, broke things, and iterated by surviving. Both changed history, but only one ended up ruling it. After Zhuge Liang's death, his successors carried on his rituals but not his genius. Shu's northern frontier eroded, its treasury dried up, and the state collapsed under the weight of its own idealism. Mao would have found that poetic, almost too poetic. He admired Zhuge Liang's diligence, discipline, and devotion, but he saw those virtues as symptoms of strategic paralysis. The saint of the Han died kneeling before a broken map. The revolutionary of the 20th century learned from that and built his empire on the opposite principle. When the map doesn't work, redraw the borders. 2,000 years apart, two men studied the same chessboard. Zhuge Liang dreamed of restoring order through precision. Mao conquered chaos by weaponizing disorder. Both were geniuses. Both changed the definition of leadership. But only one understood that structure decides fate before character ever enters the room. That's why Mao's comment still cuts deep. It wasn't an insult. It was an autopsy. Longzhong wasn't Zhuge Liang's triumph. It was his trap. And in Mao's cold arithmetic, the moment the ink dried on that plan, the outcome was already written. A divided line, a dying dream, and a lesson that outlived them both.